My dad has been incredibly open from the jump. You know, I went to a Pride festival when I was 8. I didn't know. I thought I was just supposed to be putting things up there. I started sexting pretty early on. I really enjoyed doing that. Sex work doesn't always have to be empowering. Sex work is just a job.
Hi, my name is Bree Mills, and I am a porn director with a purpose. Now, throughout my career, I have covered just about every niche, and I've created some award-winning films and brands along the way. But now, I'm much more interested in getting to know the real people behind my characters. And that's because I believe adult entertainers can be some of the most powerful role models when it comes to sex ed, consent, empowerment, and wellness. By asking the right questions, our community can really help people better understand themselves. So that's the mission of this podcast. Let's get up close. All right, Lilly Bell, I've wanted to get you in this chair since I started the podcast, so thank you for being here.
I'm excited.
We have worked in many of the same circles, and you've obviously been on a lot of adult time projects, but it is the first time we are meeting in person, at least in person on a set.
Yes, it is.
So this is like the best icebreaker.
Yeah.
I've heard you talk in interviews before, and I think you've got a lot of really interesting things to say. So this is a treat for me. So thank you for being here.
Cool. Yeah.
Let me
I'm a
tell
talker.
you. Yeah, well, I mean, I am too, and I try not to talk as much in this series, so it's good exercise. But the whole mission behind Get Up Close is a new studio that we're developing and launching this year, which is really focused on getting to know the people that we work with and really showcasing as much as possible like authentic sexual experiences. And for me, the most important aspect of sexuality is communication and what you have to say.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, let's make a podcast about this, and here we are. So let's really break the ice. Tell me a fun fact about yourself.
I guess I'll go with something that I usually say in interviews. I'm a big shark nerd. I really like sharks. I like learning about sharks. I like watching shark documentaries, often because we have to fly from like Vegas to LA a lot. On Southwest, they will add new shark documentary episodes. Like every time I go, I'm like, oh, cool, there's a new one. So I like to learn new stuff about sharks. I think that's fun.
What is it about sharks?
I don't know. I think it's the fear. I've always had a big, huge fear of sharks. So I guess for me, it's just learning that just kind of the unknown. And now I know. So it makes me feel better. Like just knowing like a lot of sharks that are at our shoreline that will bite us are juvenile sharks because they're young and they don't know what they're doing. Like most times when you're out in the open ocean, it won't happen as often, but it still can.
It's funny because I was also like very preoccupied with sharks when I was younger. And I think it was just like the fascination of like this large predator that, at least at that time I hadn't encountered on land. But Shark Week, I assume, is a big week in your calendar year.
Yeah, for sure. It was like every week could be Shark Week. You can always,
What's your favorite kind of shark?
Well, recently I just learned about this new shark, which is a shark that has learned to evolve onto land. So I would always say tiger shark or bull shark. I really like those sharks a lot. But this one is called an emulet shark because of its markings. It has like military emulet markings. But it basically has now learned how to use its fins to walk on land, which I think is pretty wild.
That's okay. That's there's actually a fantastic Netflix series that just came out called Life on Our Planet, which is going over like the 4 billion history of Earth. And there's a whole episode about, the point at which animals went from the ocean onto the land. So there you go. Coming together. They are coming together. What was your upbringing like?
My upbringing was interesting. I definitely had a kind of a tumultuous household. I'm a double divorced kid. So my mom and my dad got divorced when I was about 3. He came out as gay, and then, my mom and my stepdad got together very quickly after that. So I was always raised with a father in the household, and my stepdad and I were always very close. And then they eventually broke up or divorced finally when I was a senior in high school. But we moved like 3 to 4 houses because of their relationship. I was always mediating at a young age. That was always something I did. My upbringing was just a lot of fighting, but at the same time, I also grew up upper middle class. I was very blessed, I think, growing up. I'm a grateful kid, I feel. Yeah.
Oftentimes when you're going through it, it's different than when you get some hindsight on your life as you get older and realize, oh, maybe it wasn't quite as bad, or it certainly informed the person that I became.
Right.
Were you always a mediator?
Yeah, I guess I think I just started since a young age because I'd watch my stepdad and my mom fight, and then I wouldn't obviously want them to fight, so I'd be jumping in and trying to figure out, and then it's just funny, like at the Exotica weekend that I just had in Jersey, I found myself in like 4 different situations where I'm mediating with friends and like trying to, and it's fine because I like doing that and I'm an empath, but afterwards I felt very emotionally drained because I'm just like I was giving a lot, but also people need it, so it's one of those, yeah.
When you moved, did you have to do a lot of school changes as part of those moves?
So bizarrely enough, they moved within the same neighborhood.
Okay.
So like so it was 3 houses within the same neighborhood. They had a legal separation. He moved to Texas. They tried to try again. Like I think they made up and broke up 6, 7 times over the course of since I was like 3 to 18.
Okay. So it was a lot of sort of spinning around in the same circles.
Yeah, and doing a lot of things like, what's that saying where you do something expecting a different outcome and then it's the point of insanity when you keep expecting. Yeah, that is what I witnessed growing up. Or my mom just kept trying over and over again. And I was like, this isn't working,
How did, especially when you kind of think about the origins of your own kind of identity and certainly like your own adult sort of identity as a sexual being, what are some of your earliest memories?
Well, my dad has been incredibly open from the jump. I mean, he always, I went to a Pride festival when I was 8. It just was always like that. My dad never, ever concealed anything. And almost to the point where then it obviously kind of upset my mom. Like I would find things and then I'd come home and tell my mom about it and she would be very upset. There would just be little situations like that. But also in the same time, like my mom was also very open. Like even though she was more sexually repressed, she was a very sexual person. I think just due to things that happened to her growing up and other traumas, it was very hard for her to talk to me about sex in a way that was maturely or anything like that. But she would also be very free. Like we would go to Shasta Lake. I remember being 4 years old and someone was recording like, everybody. And my mom flipped her skirt up and was like, Shasta Lake, blah, 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 blah. And I remember being like,
whoa.
And I was sobbing. I couldn't believe my mother could do something so awful, but it's like she was just being free and loving herself. So
one of the things that drew me to you from having heard you do other interviews was, growing up with a gay dad, especially very like open, maybe sometimes like slightly too open because I had the exact same experience. And I know that the first porn that I ever saw in my life was one evening I was watching The Little Mermaid. It was on VHS and I left the video in the cassette deck. And the next morning I went to go and finish it. And it wasn't The Little Mermaid. It was 2 guys on a motorcycle. And I remember kind of very sort of self-righteously, first of all, watching the whole thing. And I still remember all the details of the plot, but then taking it to my dad in sort of a self-righteous way and be like, how dare you expose this? And him laughing. And it's like the funniest thing. But I definitely grew up with like a lot of, and on the one hand, it really helped me feel comfortable to be open, but it was also like a quite sort of no censorship of any kind household. So there were little black books oftentimes being brought out to be talked about. And he had a strange collection of like Ken dolls.
Yeah. Okay.
Called Billy dolls, which people can look up if they want to. But yeah. So anyway, so I was hilarious. it's not often that I come across somebody who's had something similar. So.
Yeah. No, my dad and I, like, in San Francisco, there's like the Red Dress Gala where everybody supports for HIV. And so I remember every year we would go and shop for a red dress for him. And so that was something that was like a
part of the tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah, we went to every Pride. I grew up in Canada, so like every Toronto Pride. And,
cool.
And back before digital cameras, he would take rolls and rolls and rolls of guys' butts that he saw. Like in.
Oh my God, it's so funny. If I had my phone here, literally, my dad just went to that San Francisco BDSM festival, the leather.
Oh,
one.
the Folsom.
The Folsom.
Yeah.
And he sent me tons of pictures of guys' butts.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
Now we've got a connecting point. So, within your kind of growing up with that sort of mix of sort of openness, and also seeing, like you said, your mom kind of overcoming some of her own repression and traumas, like how did that sort of shape, what are your earliest memories of sexuality in terms of like what you saw in media, pop culture, or how it might have influenced you?
100%. I can think of a key thing. Growing up, I remember I really loved the Pussycat Dolls. I really loved like MTV music video girls. I loved the way they danced. I loved like all of that type of stuff. I mean, I really was into just kind of like really intense feminization like figures. Like I just really liked all of that. I loved how the Bratz dolls looked, and like oftentimes when I dress, sometimes I'm like, okay, do I look like a Bratz doll? Okay, sick. Then we can, like it's like one of those things. So I remember when I was younger, I had a big party. And I remember everybody was in their pajamas, and it was a nice party. We rented a hotel room, and we had like this whole thing. And all the girls are all normal in their pajamas, and I'm the only one like in my bra with my pajamas open, like posing in front of everybody like this, like Pussycat Doll style. And I remember seeing that later on, when my stepdad showed that to me, my mom, and I was like mortified. I couldn't believe that. I was like, why wouldn't you guys stop me and say, hey, Lily, like, but they viewed it as like innocent and cute, and it wasn't anything that was bad. But I just always remember kind of doing things like that. I remember going on Chatroulette when I was in middle school. Like me and my girlfriends, we'd be like, okay, we're going to dress up tonight and flash dudes on, Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we don't need to talk all about that. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so you mentioned that sort of strong, like hyper feminine, but strong women were kind of what you gravitated towards. Why do you think that is? What's like the origin of that for you?
I don't know. I don't know. Like random things just pop into my mind. Like I always thought that like Eva Longoria and like Christina Milian were so beautiful. So when I would play mermaids in the pool with my friends when we were little, like I wanted to look like those beautiful women, like big boobs, small waist, like with the mermaid tail that was like that, kind of like the shark tail sexy fish, shark.
Yes, yeah.
Like that. Like I think growing up, we saw figures like that. And I think I was like, that's a beautiful woman, or something that emulates a woman, and I want to be womanly like that. Yeah. Jessica Rabbit. I mean, there's so many different types of things like that we see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was what are some earliest memories about self-pleasure, sort of discovering yourself in that way?
So I remember someone telling me that I can masturbate and I can, put things inside me and they would make me feel something. But what's so interesting about that is they don't, because I don't come from penetration. I come from my clit. So, at a young age, I'm trying to shove different household objects inside me. And I'm like, nothing's happening. I don't understand what's happening. Then finally, when I touched my clit, I went, oh, that's what's happening. But for so long, I didn't know. I thought I was just supposed to be putting things up there. Yeah.
That's it. And was I know, like, I remember in my experience, it was like a good number of years before I actually had an orgasm, and it was sort of like this eureka moment. Was that for you a sort of similar experience, or was it something that came, no pun intended, fairly quickly?
I don't really remember my first orgasm, which is shocking. I feel like I should. I feel like one of my first orgasms, I remember having a lot of wet dreams. Like I would have, like, some of my most intense orgasms I've ever had have been while I'm sleeping, which I don't think I'm even touching myself when that's happening. Have you ever had that happen?
Not that I can remember, but do you remember what you were dreaming about the next day?
Yeah. Like I remember when I was growing up, and this dream I remember specifically, I had a dream that James Deen, the porn star, which now, but then I had a dream about him that he was a ballet teacher.
Oh yeah.
And because I was going through ballet and I had a male ballet teacher, and then that was that. So I remember always having that dream.
Yeah. Interesting. Maybe something to like recreate one day as a ballet themed fantasy, porn fantasy.
Yeah. No, exactly. It would be really, really cool. I have that kind of fantasy to do. And I also have like a ceramic fantasy, like spinning
Ghost?
on the wheel.
Oh, spinning.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Like someone behind me,
Yeah.
and then it gets all messy with the clay.
Yeah. Nice. All right. Well, we'll bank those for later to discuss. What do you think are some of the biggest myths about female sexuality?
Well, to speak about like what we just talked about with shoving things inside, like a lot of guys think that they can just have sex with a girl by just fucking her. And I always say this to people at Exoticas, like different conventions. I like to say to men all the time, if the woman is not stimulating her clit, or anybody, if you are not stimulating the woman's clit, you're basically just a hole for you to jack off inside them. Like it's not really. And 10% of women or 50%, they can come from penetration, but I would say that most can't. So it's so important to be hitting those pleasure spots.
Yeah. Which starts by understanding them, which I think is a big issue that we have, where because there's such a lack of, especially like positive pleasure focused sex education, you're sort of taught medically what happens, but otherwise you don't know, right?
No.
And then you're kind of left to just what you discover on the internet, which without context can be quite problematic.
Yeah.
So like, from those sort of from your initial exploration with your own sexuality, where you were kind of just trying to do what other people told you and realizing, hey, this doesn't work, and hey, is there something wrong with me, to the point where you really started to discover what worked for you. What are some of like the eureka moments that you had that helped you along that way, helped you along that journey?
Tumblr.
You're not the first person to mention Tumblr.
So that's a big one.
R.I.P.
That was a big one that really opened my eyes for so many things. I mean, I started reading so many eroticas that people wrote, different clips and, different comment threads where people are talking about things, so that was a big way that I started to just learn about things for sure. And then also I started sexting a lot and talking about different things. Yeah, I started sexting pretty early on. I really enjoyed doing that. But I also started doing chat roulette really early on. I think about chat roulette and I'm like, that was almost like my startup of camming, because then I started camming and I remember being like, this is kind of like, Yeah,
well, because that was all like spontaneous exhibitionism, right? That was essentially what it was being used for. Yeah.
Huge exhibitionist. Yeah.
And was that the first time you sort of discovered that exhibitionism was sort of a kink that you had? Yeah,
I would say so. But I didn't know it. Yeah. It was more just like, oh, I like this attention. I mean, I'm a big attention whore. I like attention. I think it's fun. And then it's fun to a point. Like then there's some times where I'm like, I don't want to be perceived, but you can't pick.
I guess it goes with like being the mediator and also, right? You're going to put yourself in the middle of everything, especially if you need to diffuse things.
Yeah. Remy, what was I just saying?
You were talking about some of the big, like your own learning curves that you experienced from that, starting off doing what you thought what you were supposed to do, realizing it didn't work, to the point where you realized what did work for you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I just really started to learn my body. I would say I really started learning my body probably later on. I mean, I feel like I really knew myself sexually when I was like 19, but I didn't at all. Like, I thought I started to. And then, I mean, really like my biggest sexual journeys and all the things I've learned about myself have been in the last like 4 to 5 years. Yeah, I would say.
What did you think you learned when you were 19?
Well, I learned about some fun few things. Like I remember me and my ex sitting across from each other and trying slapping for the first time. Like I hit him and then he hit me, and then we went a little harder and then tried like doing that more and more. And then it got like, like kind of animalistic. And then eventually we were having sex. Like we just tried so many different fun little things like that. Like we tried, he bought me a Hitachi and tied me to a chair. And, we did. I remember he also would get so upset. Like he wanted to always make me come. He would do anything to make me come. But he'd be down there for like 40 minutes and nothing was happening and I wasn't able to communicate. Now I'm really able to communicate. So I'd be like, it's just not working. But then I would go and masturbate alone. And if I was masturbating alone, he'd come in there and be really mad. And be like, I want to help you. And I'm like, no, I just want to do it by myself. And I always felt bad about that. But it's kind of like sometimes people need their alone time.
Well, and like you said, the communication element is it's not a natural element.
No.
So it's something that you do need to learn and build confidence for, and there's no manual for it. So I can definitely understand why that would happen.
Last night, I was just like, maybe I guess TMI, but not really because we're talking about sex. But I had sex with someone that is a civilian, and I've been waiting to have sex with them, and I was excited to have sex with them. And so when we did, I could tell that they were very nervous, and I could tell that they were in their head about some things. And so I just tried to have open lines of communication. And so I looked at him and I said, "How do you like to come?" And then he looked at me and he didn't really know what to reply back. And then afterwards, he was like, "I've never had anyone ask me that."
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it's important to ask, you know, but it also can throw people off in the moment because then they're like,
Yeah. Well, consent is such a huge part of how we work, especially in today's day and age. But we take for granted that it's something that in the civilian world is happening as equally, which we know it isn't. So on the one hand, it does sort of force that deer in headlights reaction, but they will never forget you.
Yeah.
They'll never forget that moment. And probably is going to be the catalyst for a lot of self-confidence and improvement on their end. So like you set them on their journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay. We'll look at it like that.
Well, look at it like that.
Yeah.
So speaking of your journey, tell me what led you into sex work.
Okay. Well, I've always... like we've said, I've always been into the sexual lifestyle. It's something that's always been just an eye catcher for me, going to strip clubs and being like, I want to be that girl on the stage. I always felt that. I've always wanted a bunch of people to kind of know my name and know me, but I didn't really know what for. And then now we're kind of doing this and I'm like, maybe this is what I was thinking about when I was younger. But yeah, basically how it started is I remember watching Tyra Banks back when I was, I don't even know, a long time ago, back when Spiegler took her to the Tyra Banks show. Do you remember this? And she was sitting there and they dressed her like a church girl. They made her wear ballet flats. And Tyra was like, how do you feel, having sex with that many people?
Right.
And she said something pretty profound. And even at her young age, she was like, Tyra, what might make one woman feel empowered might make another not. And you are not the judge of that, So I feel empowered. And I don't know, something that I remember watching that and being like, that's really cool. But also throughout my sex work journey, I've also realized that and I'm a big advocate for this. Sex work doesn't always have to be empowering. Sex work is just a job. And that's okay that it's not always stick it to the man and you want this money and it's just a job and that's okay.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that.
Yeah, no, it's a very, very valid and like any job, there's, aspects of the job you love, aspects of the job you do because it's a job, and aspects of the job that you're not going to do. And, and that's all very important as well. Who was the guest that was on the Tyra Banks show? Do you remember her name?
Well, it was Sasha Grey.
Sasha Grey.
Yeah, it was Sasha Grey. Yeah.
Also, not the first time Sasha Grey has been mentioned as an influence as well. So one thing that I'm always curious about, because I was a teenager in the era, like right at the beginning of the internet. So for me, when I was a teenager, porn was like what you could rent when you turned 18 at the video store, or for like a party or a joke, or what was like under your older brother's mattress.
Yeah.
So it never, it was always something that was very kind of like far away and distant. And I feel like with the internet and performers like Sasha Grey, sort of for a generation of people are really equal to celebrities and role models. And did you find that like it was sort of, like it became a clearer journey for you to get into because you saw who was in it, and it wasn't so much of a kind of the vivid girls of old and like the kind of closed doors and all that stuff? Yeah.
And I mean, I know we're not supposed to mention this documentary because it's one of our documentaries that our whole, industry looks at as negative, but that Hot Girls Wanted Turned On documentary, the one that featured Vanessa Vera Cruz, Bailey Rain, I remember watching that documentary and then going and talking to Hussey. Like that was a key start of me. And like even when it was kind of talked about in a bad light and all of that, I didn't really look at it like that. I didn't look at it as that bad. It was still bad, but I guess I also just recognized what porn was in general and how people will also paint us. So I kind of just was like, I took it with a grain of salt, and I don't know. So when I met Vanessa Veracruz, she was a talent liaison for Reality Kings, and I mentioned that to her, and she was like, "I don't like that documentary," and I'm like, "I know, and I completely understand that, but a reason why I'm sitting here right now is because of you in a way, you know." So she did appreciate that, but
yeah. She's someone that I worked with maybe 10 years ago, quite a lot. So good to hear that that she ended up going into other areas of our industry that are super, super important.
Yeah.
What have been since you got into porn? What have been some of the biggest lessons that you've learned that you would want to share with others?
Oh my God!
I know. Open the floor.
Yeah, God, there's so many. Always make your own first impressions. You'll hear so much talk about certain people, and you make your own impression of that person. People always want to talk shit. People always want to say stuff. Unless you hear multiple things that are negative, like abusive or things like that, then obviously take that into consideration. But I think a lot of people will have their own opinions about people. Don't give anybody any money.
Yes.
Save your own.
Yeah.
I think also just don't take everything so serious. Like I've just think about the past 4 or 5 years of how much I've stressed myself out and done all that, and really all the chips have fallen where are meant to. So I think I just need to calm down. I guess I would tell everyone else to calm down too if they're really high strung.
Very good.
Yeah.
How do you prioritize self-care and sexual health within the work that you do?
God, I mean, it has been a crazy turnaround with the last 4 or 5 years. Like, I've never thought I could be so clean in my life. Like, learning how to really, really, truly be clean. Like, I thought I was clean before, and now it's like I really take it to a next level. And then I also prioritize my sexual health in the way that I'm kind of like an athlete. Like, now I've been icing my vagina. Like, after I have a rough scene, I will ice it just like an athlete would ice their muscle. And I swear that that's really helped me. Epsom salt baths. I use a lot of vitamin E. I think a lot of girls don't understand that they maybe use too much boric acid, and that can be a detriment. Like, you don't need to use it all the time. There's so many things to learn. Like, it's just insane. Yeah.
One of the this is an area that I'm very interested in, particularly in how we can be able to provide more resources for newer performers in the industry. But the challenge is that it is so individual. So what if we were going to tackle that, what would be your advice, to me in terms of like, how can we help educate new performers while still respecting that everybody is unique?
This is another thing too, is like, I think dental hygiene is very important. And I think a lot of like something that I've realized is like, not everybody has the means to pay for dental hygiene and different things like that. But I think everybody can like tongue scrape and different things of that nature, so I think that kind of needs to be talked about. Flossing. It's also just something where you're being considerate of your other person. But I think sometimes those things to talk about can be a little dicey because you don't want to offend anybody. But yeah, I think just an overall hygiene thing, just of what people need to know, and then also just an overall like, I don't know. I've even been thinking about just like all these random things that come to my mind. Like, write down just like a whole book of what you would need to know with getting into the industry. Just like so like to the soaps that you need, to like the bank account that you might want to use, or what type of OnlyFans team do you just different. I don't even know. You know what I'm saying?
No,
just
I completely know that you like a real kind of resource for performers to know that it is eclectic, but here's like a collection of best practices that myself and my peers have amassed over these years. Yeah, I think something like that would be amazing.
Something I always say is they never give you a brochure on how to do porn. So when you start, they just throw you to the wolves, and it'd be really nice to kind of maybe have a brochure. And to kind of know like, hey, these things might happen to you, or it could happen. But I think a lot of people just look at us kind of like, I don't know what to say. Like they throw us to the wolves, but I think they think like, okay, you can learn on your own, or they don't want to like freak people out.
Or there's just the general lack of ignorance, like how you mentioned kind of you've learned more about your body and how to take care of yourself in your years in the industry than you ever had before. And that was from having to figure it out. And so I think that there's a people even in our industry on all sides who just don't recognize the toll that it takes physically, or take for granted.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like you work a lot. Great. Like maybe you shouldn't work as much. Maybe taking, understanding your body and knowing when you need to give yourself
100%.
respite and, like when not to. And I think just the more that performers themselves are open about, hey, here's the bag of tricks that I've learned. Oh, you've done that too. You've done that too. The more everybody's gonna be like, oh, tongue scraping.
Yeah.
Maybe that is something I should put in my set bag, or maybe that's something that we should provide on set or whatever. So I think it's just finding forums to have those conversations. I know with Adult Time, we just launched a new performer center section of our public site, which is all about that. So we started with what to expect on our sets in terms of like our standards and making sure that we can put that in all our call info.
Right.
We can, ask the agents that we're working with to send it when it's a new talent, and just as a baseline to start encouraging other videos. So I think that's going to be something over the next couple years that we look to kind of beef that up with little information using the reach that we have with the people we work with to like, let's put out some of that material and that education.
Yeah.
So I'm very, the tongue scraping thing I hadn't heard, but that's a very good one. If you were a sex ed teacher for a day, people would learn a lot, but what would you teach them?
I would teach them about herpes. I would teach them about different things that you have to do with a yeast infection. I would teach about like fertility, like, like how many like when you actually are fertile to get pregnant. Cause I think a lot of things when you get taught in sex education is like, well, don't have sex cause you can get pregnant at any point. Well, the thing is there's only a certain window, but there is other windows. And I think also when I'm talking about it, I'm not even fully educated on it. So it's almost like I feel like more people need to know about that. I don't know. I think it's incredibly important.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah. I don't know. I think I would also sex ed. I would talk about like, well, and this kind of jumps into a religion a little bit because my ex and I would get in an argument about it. But like, he was Jewish, so he was circumcised, so that was the whole thing. But I think that there's a big shame sometimes with some men where if they're uncut, they feel ashamed, and I think that that's something that they don't need to feel ashamed about. In fact, it's like the way you were born. And like I remember my stepfather would say that like, guys that are uncut is gross because they would get schmegma and different things like that. But I remember thinking like, well, vagina folds can get schmegma too, but you clean them. That's what you do. You keep clean, But I think there's a shame around some men with being cut or uncut, and maybe that's a cultural thing or due to different things flip factor in. But
no, it's very true.
Different things to,
What you had mentioned earlier, like how you had a recent experience where you asked somebody how they like to come, and it was a eureka moment for them. Sort of similar to, I think, the advice that we can give in terms of like sexual health and wellness. I think there's a lot of advice that we can offer the community at large when it comes to consent and the importance of communication and sex. How have you seen that evolve over your years in the industry? Because I know you've been in long enough to sort of see there's probably been a pretty big change.
Yes, there has. I mean, consent talks are something that is occurring on more and more sets, and they're taken way more seriously. And I think that's amazing. I think it's also really good to have things written down in paper. I also realized, like, because I had an issue for a while with choking. Like, I wasn't able to get choked due to some trauma that I had. And luckily, I was able to work through that trauma, which is an amazing, victory. So with that, with the 2 to 3 years in the industry where I wasn't able to have a hand on my neck, I noticed that I had to initiate the yes and no checklist, because I think a lot of people, without even thinking about it, just put a hand to the neck and they don't even mean to. It's not something like they're, so I had to bring that up. And then I noticed as time went on, I didn't have to initiate the yes and no checklist anymore. People started to they were just there, which was really cool. I also think it's cool what you guys put in. You can check yes or no if you want to have off-camera sex or on-camera sex, because there's so many things where, like, if a girl, fawns out, like the freeze stuff, fawn. And I fawn out a lot where I'm like, oh, that's fine. That's okay, and was it? No, but,
Well, it's a consent is a ever evolving thing, right? So one of the I think the most valuable things that we've learned is, because we have such because we're always reaching out as part of our aftercare program and really trying to gather feedback. Most of the improvements that we've made to our consent practices have come directly from getting feedback from talent based on experience.
Yeah.
And trying as best as possible with all of the nuance of sexuality, knowing that like when it comes to that conversation, like when it's a gray area, that means that there needs to be a conversation about it. And I think one of the biggest gray areas is, you know, when the lights need to be changed or, you know, somebody needs to go to the bathroom, there's a break, what is happening? And for some in that day, in that moment, it might be great to continue. And for others, it might not be what they want.
Yeah.
But never like leave it up to you all to figure out.
Yeah.
That was definitely one of our big takeaways from doing consent conversations was all the moments when the cameras are not rolling are just as important, if not more important, because, you know, you never want somebody to be in a situation they don't want to be in. So,
yeah.
What are your biggest red flags?
Meaning of someone else or of myself?
Oh, I mean, I'll take both.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to give me.
God, so I have a few red flags. Currently right now, I'm actually, I don't know if this is embarrassing. I'm in anger management. So I'm like currently trying to like figure out myself, and I'm a very reactive person. So I'm trying to like manage that and all of that. So I say my red flags would kind of be my reactiveness for sure. I'm a very dramatic person, so I try to reel that in. But a red flag that I would see on somebody else, just a lack of care or emotional depth, like just not being able to, like, I don't know. For me, I know I need a lot of reassurance. I need a lot of emotional validation. I need a lot of consoling. And so if I see a red flag in someone that isn't able to provide that for me, that's a big no-no. Yeah.
Interesting that that's what you're feeling internally when you've got that external, like, I will help solve everyone else's problem. Yeah. I mean, I feel you on that, but I think it's important, like, you know, whether it's TMI or not, like it's important to recognize when you need to do self-reflection, and most people don't. And internal versus external self-awareness are not the same thing.
Well, and so this is something I'm learning. So like everyone's like, you're super self-aware. I'm like, yeah, I'm super self-aware, but there's a difference between being aware and then actually doing something about it. So now I'm on the working about doing something about it.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I mean, I think I probably spent the first 35 years of my life being incredibly internally self-aware.
Yeah.
You know, to the point where I had a plan for everything. I had analyzed everything out. But then when you flip the switch and you're like, well, what do other people see when you're reacting this way? I had it was like 0%.
Yeah.
I had, you know, lack of natural empathy or natural tact. And I've been really working on that on myself, because it, you know, you get so far with internal self-awareness, and it's important to also see how other people are seeing you as well, right? And and help that to help you. What within this, all the scenes you've shot and all the projects you've done, what are some of your favorites and why?
Oh, wow. Gosh, I've done a lot of really cool projects. So one of the projects that I did that I got nominated for Best Leading Actress, I'm very happy about that one, because I don't know, I play a crazy girl very well. So like when I got booked for it, it just like, it wasn't really a hard thing to have to like jump into. And I also didn't really look at it as something that I thought was going to even be looked at as nominations. Like I kind of had fun with it, and I just like did my thing. And so looking back on that, and I've had a lot of people come up to me and be like, that was really good acting. And I'm like, yeah, I play a crazy girl really well, I guess. It just is easy. No, but I loved that. I loved my gangbang this year. What else did I love this year? My big orgy thing that I did for Climax, where it was kind of like I was the center, and then I got a bunch of cum on me, and that was really fun. What else did I do this year? Yeah, I don't know. I just kind of, I'm going to be honest. I had a really rough year medically this year. So I had a few things taken from me that was very devastating, which I'm sure you know about. So that was, it was tough. So when I look back on this year, I'm a little bit negative Nancy, but I have to remind myself that like, I'm only human. I'm not a robot. And I have to look at all of the things that I should shut up and be grateful for the things that I have been nominated for, because I've worked really, really hard. So, you know, it's just funny because I'm such a greedy person. I'm like, but then I could have, but then but that's part of the drive, which is great. But it also is like, debilitating.
Yeah,
And
oh,
you're
yeah.
like, I want more. Yeah.
There's a quote that I probably say to myself every day, which is an Aristotle quote, which is it is in the darkest moments that we must focus to see the light. And so even if it had sort of short-term negative impacts, it will get you where you're going, where you're supposed to be going, and it's, you can always think, at least I'll be able to look back on it soon.
Mm-hmm.
And it I've certainly had those ups and downs as well. And that quote keeps me motivated to keep going.
Yeah. I'll remember that one.
Yeah. Looking ahead, what are you kind of interested in doing next? Because regardless of anything, you had a kick-ass year. You did a lot of good projects.
Yeah.
So what's sort of next on the horizon?
I did. I did have a kick-ass year, and I should completely be 100% happy with that. So with that, I want to go even more. So I'm like, yeah, let's do more. So, I mean, I have a few things on my bucket list that I haven't hit yet, and I really want to do that before I'm 30. I'm about to turn 28. So the next 2 years, I'm going to do quite a bit in porn. And then we're going to kind of see that transition when I'm 30. We'll see. I really do want to get into like talent liaison work. I feel like I'd be an amazing person for that. And I feel like because I'm a model and other people know me and just they would trust me, and I've worked in offices before, so I also know like that whole background. And I just feel like I could see myself eventually staying in this industry, obviously not in front of the camera, but kind of just seeing where I would go. Like someone I always think about and I look up to is like Kylie Ireland, golden age porn. And then, she makes all the sets for everybody. And you see Brett Rossi, she was a performer. Now she's a makeup artist. Like you just see so many different types of people that still live on, but we'll just see.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really important to, especially with our community, to create positive pathways for like any industry, right? Career opportunities. And I think when I look at across our different crews, the number of performers or performers that have transitioned behind the camera.
Allison.
And so, I think that there's a real tremendous value to that, because you'll always have a perspective that no matter how, in tune or empathetic, I will never have that perspective. And it's a really important to make sure that perspective stays at the forefront of what we do. Yeah. What interests you about talent liaison work, intimacy coordination? What would make you be really drawn to moving in that direction?
Well, I met a talent liaison in France when I went to shoot for Dorsel, and her name's Sandrine. And the way that she took care of Liz Jordan and I, she just went above and beyond. And she just was somebody that I just was like, if I could do what she did for us two, she just made our trip just so amazing. And it was because of her in a lot of ways. And so I think being able to have that effect, and it's a way to help people. I mean, and so that's what makes you sleep better at night, is if you're helping people. And I just feel like, I don't know, I want to see a transition for me, and I don't know exactly what that will be. And when I saw that, and I've met Vanessa, I just was like, that matches for me. And then also Casey, she's the Dorsel talent liaison for the US. And, she's someone I majorly look up to. And I don't know. I just feel like it just fits for me.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing to hear. And I think there's a good number of performers in the industry who have done the certification or are going through, that path. So much like we talked about in terms of you learn by asking around and gathering best practices. I think there's a lot of peers in the space that love to talk to. I know Avery Black as well.
Exactly.
And she just started directing for us. So again, seeing different opportunities. Of course, Casey, I think her first pro scene directing was with us as well. So very, very in support of finding pathways. As I mentioned, the Up Close studio that we're developing this year is really about trying to shine a more authentic, intimate portrait of the performers we're working with. How does that vision resonate with you as a performer?
Well, I mean, I think it's really cool to show things that are not just like, mommy stuck in a dryer or, super glam or super gonzo. I mean, I really love just basically us naturally who we are. I think that is really cool. And it's also kind of rare.
Strangely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I find, I agree with you. It's not as much of a focus as it should be.
Yeah.
So, hey, we'll take the opportunity in that
Yeah.
case. For anybody who's watching this, sort of as my last question, who might be feeling insecure about their own sexualities or not quite sure where to turn for advice, what advice would you give them?
I would say, I don't know. I guess my biggest thing is there might be feeling a lot of pressure to like do something about it or feel like you need to. And I think one of the biggest things is like you'll go through transitions and phases and changes, and like no one's putting you on a certain time constraint. Like when you decide and you feel ready to come forward and dive into that, then you do, you know? And I think it's important to just not, you know, try to reach out if you can to different people that you know, and try to do your research. And it's just hard because I feel like I come from like a very different standpoint, because like when a woman is bisexual, it's almost looked at as like a glamorization or a celebration. And it's kind of like, oh, cool, girls kiss, let's see that, you know? And it's not. And then versus a guy who is bisexual, that is looked at in a completely different fashion. Like I have this theory that there is sexuality is so fluid, and there's just as many bisexual men as there are bisexual women, but because of society and how we haven't been able to allow that to flourish, we haven't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just feel like listening to podcasts like this is important, so that you know that there's people out there that are like-minded like you, that, you know, if you're stuck in a town that you don't have people around you like that, you know, there are people out there in different areas that share those thoughts and the same mind as you, you know, and you're not alone.
Well, I appreciate your mind.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a real pleasure to speak with you. We could probably go on for hours and hours. I want to encourage you to keep using your voice, because you have a lot of really important things to say.
Thank you.
Especially in the type of direction you want to go in. You know, you could be that person to help that new person coming in, sharing your good advice and all the stuff you have learned. So keep on that journey. We'll certainly continue to work on a variety of projects. All right. Thank you, my friend. All right. I just wrapped talking to Lilly Bell. She's someone who I've wanted to talk to for a long time, pretty much since starting this podcast. She had a lot of really interesting things to say. And what stuck out to me was the fact that while sex work is empowering, it is also a job. And that's okay sometimes when it is just a job. We talked about the importance of self-care, even icing your privates sometimes, and how she sees a future for herself within the sex industry, not just in front of the cameras, but working behind the scenes as an intimacy coordinator as well, which is amazing to hear. So I really appreciated this. If you appreciated this conversation, please make sure to support Lilly, support our mission, support this podcast. You can do that by liking, by commenting, by subscribing to our channel. You can also find all of our social links in the description below. I really encourage you to check them out. We appreciate you giving us this platform to share what we've learned and what advice we have. And I guarantee there's going to be another good conversation next week, so stick around. Thank you.